Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California, you are listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this season finale of Unsugarcoated with Aalia. I am definitely happy to be here in the studio and have this opportunity to have what is hopefully going to be a very, actually, to be quite honest, a heavy but unsugar-coated conversation. So I am going to give you some warning. There's going to be some heavy information that's going to be relayed, especially when I speak personally with my story. So let's get into it, guys. My story with sexual predators is one that often shocks and surprises people. Between the ages of 4 and 7 years old, I was molested by 5 different men. I endured one more molestation, and I was sexually assaulted again at 14 years old by a man that I trusted. My past has not been easy nor pretty at times, and as a result of that, I was homeless at that young of an age because of divorced parents who weren't capable of supporting me the way that I needed it as a youth. This left me mostly on my own and dependent. And when a husband and wife with 2 kids from my church offered to take me in, I thought I was getting a break at having a more stable life, because I got to tell you, as a 14-year-old girl in those type of situations, that's really all I was looking for. Unfortunately, after a few months, when these incidences occurred, I didn't know what to do. And shortly after, I was asked to leave the family and given the option to go into the women's home associated with the church and moved in on my 15th birthday. As of my birthday, June 30th, that was 30 years ago, When I finally found the courage to speak up and say what had happened to me, the pastors of my church refused to believe that their son-in-law would do such a thing. I was given no justice, no peace, and in fact, I was often subjected to being around him, knowing what he had done. I was silenced, and I was left as a young girl to manage the emotions, not just of the sexual assault, but of the way the adults that I trusted had failed me. On October 13th, 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 218 to protect the rights of survivors of childhood sexual assault. AB218 opens a 3-year look-back window for previously time-barred claims. This will enable adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse in California to file claims regardless of their current age. For almost 16 years, the courthouse doors have been closed to California's adult survivors of childhood sexual assault. The 3-year look-back window created by AB 218 opened on January 1st, 2020, and for a limited time, survivors of childhood sexual assault, like myself, have the option to bring civil suits against their predators and the institutions that covered for them, regardless of how long ago it took place. Because of the new AB 218 law, I now have the choice to finally seek justice for myself, all these years later. Struggling with this decision, but determined to go through it if it can help another person, this is actually going to be part of my own personal journey on whether I decide to move forward or not, and if I do, what that's going to look like. And my hope is that that will bring valuable insight, perhaps a roadmap for someone else who might have to make that decision for themselves. My goal is to empower others. Over the course of my life, I've learned what living empowered truly means. It's not about being a bitch, because that is what women who stand up for themselves are often perceived as. It is not about revenge, because as a victim, I didn't ask for this to happen to me in the first place. This is about justice, and please make no mistake about that. I've decided to have this conversation today to offer something of value to those out there who need to know what this could mean for them. And here to help me with this conversation, we have a returning guest and his associate who are eager to support and advocate for victims and explain in detail the AB 218 law. So everyone, let's get started with that. Samuel Dordulian is the president and owner of Dordulian Law Group, previously a deputy district attorney for Los Angeles County. Mr. Dordulian worked as a sex crimes prosecutor. From his days of acting as a prosecutor, protecting the rights of victims, to currently protecting the rights of injured workers, he has dedicated his life to making a significant difference in the lives of his clients. Welcome back, Sam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me back.
Arpineh Yeremian, Esquire, is trained by some of the best defense litigators in Los Angeles. She is an experienced advocate for clients with a career record that demonstrates her versatility in the courtroom, and she is devoted to fighting for those suffering from injury. Part of the Dordulian Law Group, we are fortunate to have both of them here today to discuss in detail Assembly Bill 218. Please welcome Arpineh Yeremian.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Thank you both. Well, First of all, and I told you I was going to talk about this out in the room, in the waiting room. We had you on recently, you and Detective Castillo Moses, actually just a few episodes ago, discussing police brutality and things following George Floyd. And I had, in one of the questions, I had said, what is your favorite type of case? And, when I watched back, I cringed. I can't lie. And to people in the audience out there who know me, I do this as a passion. I do this as a desire to help others. I'm not trained as a host. And so this is all a learning thing for me as well. But when I looked back, I kind of cringed. I'm like, favorite, probably not the right word, because I know that what you deal with is very sensitive. And I can also imagine, while I mean passionate, the wrong word came out. And so, I really appreciate you coming back and having the opportunity to discuss this. So I'd like to start with you. You have, after 2 decades of service, you have convicted numerous pedophiles, stalkers, arsonists, and murderers. And since the inception of Dordulian Law Group in 2008, you've already obtained tens of millions of dollars in settlements for injured workers and individuals who were once ignored and rejected by the system. Tell us what this new law means for you. Let's kind of you can start at the basics with it, if you will. But yeah.
Well, as we kind of talked about the last time I was here, and maybe that was not the correct response to call it my favorite type of case, but it is a case that I feel very passionate about, is advocating for victims of sexual assault, particularly children. And when I was with the district attorney's office, that's primarily what I did, and spent half my career doing that. So it is an area that gives me great pleasure to be able to advocate for them and to give them some sense of healing and justice if I'm able to do so. So this law actually kind of got me really excited, because it finally gives voice to those who the courtroom doors were closed for, well, they thought probably forever. It's a 3-year window, it's like you described, for all those people who have been victims of childhood sexual assault, and it has to be exclusively for those who were under the age of 18 at the time the sexual assault occurred. For those people, they now have 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, to file a civil lawsuit. And it's not the criminal. They can't necessarily go in and ask for a criminal conviction, but it is only for civil lawsuits. But it gives them a chance for them to seek justice, for them to get healing at a time when they thought that would not be possible. And this 3-year look-back window, literally for all of those where the statute of limitations had expired, completely reopened. So we can go back as far back as we can prove the case, and there's no time limitations. And, for a lot of people, and I think you yourself is a great example, it takes victims of childhood sexual assault many years to come to terms with the ability to come forward, number one.
Absolutely.
And feel comfortable to come forward and to approach the authorities and to take this big step of filing a lawsuit. It's a very big step for most survivors of sexual assault. So this law is very important to be able to give them voice, a chance to be heard, and a chance to get justice.
Absolutely. I want to say something that when you 2 things to that. Absolutely. Data proves, and as I shared in my opening, I was actually molested many times. Only one of my childhood predators was sent to prison. That's because he had also been raping his own daughter and molested another girl, and Napa County sent him. They were able to prosecute him, but many other people, they got away, or it was just these things that happen. But data does show it is very hard for victims to come forward, and then and I didn't have this perfect life, so of course I feel, well, then I'm going to be put right. The defense is going to come after me. But furthermore, whenever we've had these discussions on social change, and you said it last time, even with regards to another situation, and I'm finding this, part of creating that change is hitting people in the pocketbook. And I don't want to just talk about, because to me the bigger part to this AB law is not just the person who assaulted me, but the organization that covered it up, because that matters, right? As organizations can tend to have this, turning a blind eye. You do not get to be judge and jury. You do not get to make that decision. Whether you believe it happened or not, you have a moral and a legal obligation to say something. So, I love that you guys are so, and we wanted to get this out on the air. We want to get people aware of it. Arpineh, how do you feel? So you have a psychology background.
I do.
Let's talk about a survivor. I mean, we're going to use me as that example. After we had the conversation about what options I had to say, wow, this is going to make me peel off some old memories. If I go through this, I have to sit down and in detail explain what happened to me. These are very uncomfortable conversations.
Very much so.
Please tell me how you handle these type of situations, what you advise.
You know, and in a lot of our situations with a lot of the people we deal with, we sometimes are the first people these people are coming to and talking about this. We're talking 40 years, 50 years, 20 years, people in high school who are now married, have children, and to be that first point of contact for these survivors is crucial. Because they come to us for legal advice, but more often than not, what we're doing is counseling on a whole nother level. And that, to us, honestly, at least for me, takes priority over the legal advice. Because the legal stuff we'll get to,
Right.
you know? And oftentimes in our first meeting or our first phone call, you know, in the last couple months, the world has kind of gone crazy, so we haven't been able to do our face-to-face meetings, but we need to connect. And that connection, honestly, organically happens. And people always come to me in my surroundings when they know what we do, and they say, well, how do you know? How can you believe them? How, you know, it's been so many years.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, we got to talk about
And
that.
I get, you know, in my circle, I get, you know, the devil's advocate kind of question all the time. And I said, if you sit in a room with me and you talk to these people, you yourself with no experience, never having heard it, you will know if they're making it up or it's true, you know? And if they are making it up and I can't catch it or Sam can't catch it or our victim advocate can't catch it, then there's something wrong, you know? And so that role that we play is like a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist or just a friend. Sometimes I don't have to say much at all. I just have to let them unload. And that is critical for these people. That's what they need.
Yeah, because of course people want to say, oh, these people are being coached.
Exactly.
They're being, you know, there have been accusations of people saying, well, they're inferring that they're feeding them this information. And, you know, I don't have any reason to lie. I've gone on with my life. I have a wonderful life right now. Again, I said this was 30 years ago. I was 15 years old. And it's very interesting, you know, of course, there's that feeling of like, well, people are going to say, why are you bringing this up now? Well, first of all, I didn't have the opportunity to. I knew for many years there was nothing I could do because, like you said, by the time I figured it out, what could I do?
Exactly.
You know, to follow up on something you just said, what I tell the jury all the time, and we get that, and the defense, you know, starts indicating that they've been coached, they've been fed this information, this is something that they're making up. And one thing I always say to the jury, and I think it hits home to them, is look at what this person had to go through to come and sit before you and tell their story. Look how painful that entire process was. Why would they do that just for fun?
Right.
This is something that's extremely painful for these people and time-consuming and just really inconvenient. They don't just do that because, you know, someone suggested something to them and they say, okay, fine, great, I'll go with that. It's not really reasonable of an argument or a defense. Like Arpineh said, you know, you sit down and really talk to them, you really get a sense for whether this is true or not. And one of the things that we do at Dordulian Law Group, and I think it's critical that we do this, is it's a combination of not only being their lawyers, but I bring in the mental health component as well. We have two victim advocates, trained certified victim advocates, full-time with my office. My wife is a licensed clinical social worker that also works with our victims of sexual assault. And I know, having done this with the DA's office, that's the first component that our survivors need, is we get them into therapy. That's the first thing we do. Before I do anything, before I do some legal maneuver, I want to make sure that they're okay and they're ready and prepared for the road ahead, because it's not going to be an easy road. And I'm not going to lie to people and say, well, this is going to be a cakewalk. It's not. So we get them into therapy. We're there for them to answer any all questions. You know, our victim advocates field calls sometimes at all hours of the night because the anxiety starts kicking in when it becomes real, like we're really going to do this. And we need to combine both of that. We need to provide both of those services, not just the legal services, but the mental health services as well. I think it's critical that we have to do both.
Is this only in California now? Because I know Governor Newsom put this in. So unfortunately, then that means that this law is really open. This opportunity, I should say, is only open for California victims. Is that why? Because I read somewhere that they think they anticipate anywhere from between 1,000 to 1,400 possibly new cases being brought. So that's as low as it is because it's only California.
Right now, this is AB218 applies only to California. However, there are other states that have look-back windows. This is not something new. In fact, in California, we did that. We did the same exact thing many, many years ago. I think we had a 1 or 2 year look-back window many years ago. So other states have experimented with this, and you just never know when or if you'll ever get another look-back window. So I would advocate to everybody who's even considering it, don't wait for the possibility that there might be another look-back window 10
Right.
years or 20 years from now, because it may not be. Just because we did it once before and now we're doing it again in California. Take advantage of this opportunity. We have 3 years to file, and if we don't, who knows what will happen in the future.
Yeah, and I will say, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember that look back window, and I was already aged out. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were certain parameters. This one is unique because it really takes off that. So
Wide
now,
open.
so that leads me to say, what has led to this? I mean, from what I understand, and I would like for you guys to talk. I mean, is this because of I'm not trying to throw the Catholic Church under the bus, but there have been the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church were two of the things, because we do need to go back to the organizations.
Right.
So is that kind of what has led to this new law?
That is a huge component. I mean, the Me Too movement, it was a huge component as well. But it is those institutions, I think, that angered a lot of people. Because those institutions in particular that you just named, the Catholic Church and the Boy Scouts, there's clear evidence that they were very well aware of these pedophiles within their ranks. And they did, not only did they, it's not as if they did nothing. They took active steps to protect the organization and sacrifice the child.
Yep.
And I think that's abundantly clear now with all the evidence that we have. I think that really angered our legislators to provide this. And part of AB 218, one of the nice features of AB 218, or a new novel feature, is the treble damages. They're putting the institutions on notice. If we can prove not only that this happened and that the institution had knowledge or should have had knowledge, then if we can further prove that they actively hid this information that they were aware of, then whatever the verdict is in this particular case, it can be tripled.
Wow.
So if we can prove that they actively knew and actively hid this information, then the institution itself can get hit with a very significant fine. And something you said earlier, it's not so much because we're going to go out and, I don't think most of the survivors are out there saying, well, I want to be rich and that's why I'm going to do this. But this treble damages was put into place to prevent institutions from allowing this to keep going in the future. They must take active steps. If you're aware of a pedophile within your ranks, do something about it. Protect the children. Create protocols. Create systems, checks and balances. If there's red flags, do something about it. Call the police. You're a mandated reporter. Take some action and protect the child. That's what it's here for. And sometimes it takes the institutions to get hit in their pocketbook significantly until a change occurs.
Exactly. I mean, you said that before, and that's why I brought that up. I mean, it's so true. Okay, what are the challenges? I mean, like you touched on it a little bit. So again, going to me, I mean, I do know of one other person out there that I had gotten into contact a couple years ago. I'm trying to get a hold of her again because I know we had a conversation. It was very interesting in my case, and I am going to share some of the story because I'd gone to my pastors, and it was a very difficult situation. I was prayed over, and it was just kind of ridiculous now when I look back. And then after I, would be done, they'd say, "So, have you changed your story?" I'd say no, because if anything, more than ever, I'm like, no, I mean, God's got my back. And like, if everything you're telling me is true, and I know that the truth will set me free, then I'm speaking my truth. And then I would just get this look of like, oh, well, I thought we cast the devil out of you, but maybe we didn't.
As if it's a cure or something.
Yeah, because I wasn't saying what they wanted to hear.
Right.
So, but again, 30 years later, if I can reach out to this person. Oh, and I have to say this, then several years later, because I was involved with that church for quite a long time. I'm not going to lie. And there were good things about it that I got, and I'll never deny that. But there were also a lot of things that were taken advantage of and so forth. And this being very key, that they just denied me my rights. But then later on, the pastor sat me down and said, I do know you were telling the truth.
Wow.
And that's the thing that really upsets me. And even in that moment, she still didn't. And that Sunday at church, I had to stand there knowing that she knew now, and then watch him operate the sound system at the back of the church. I cannot begin to tell you. And some people be like, well, why didn't you go? Where was I going to go? You know, if you understand someone, you know, I'm not going to lie and tell you that my life from 14 to 22 was easy, because it was not. My life is a result of my, and so as a victim, sometimes I know that that can be turned on me and make me look bad. But for other people out there potentially seeking justice, and like you said, it's gonna be long, because anyone who thinks a civil suit is quick, years later they're like, wow, so I'm still going through this. It's a shocker, right?
Exactly.
But what are some of the challenges that you guys face as their advocates and as their counsel? You know, what are the things that you see most often? All right, at least specific to this, you know what I mean?
I'll start on this one. There's many challenges. You know, first off, like I said, it's credibility. It's making sure the story matches up. Once we have that sense, and I think, honestly, everyone we've met along the way, we've been able to help them. It's then we put our kind of lawyer cap on and say, okay, how are we going to collect evidence to prove this? And we have cases as late as, I don't know, the 50s in Hollywood High.
Wow.
And so all our, by way of example of that case, all of our witnesses and potential evidence, they're aging. It's 70-plus-year-old people, for instance. So we have a list of people we're calling, collecting evidence, testimony, statements. What do you remember? We have high school yearbook clippings, homecoming pictures, things like that. So one of the challenges from the legal perspective is the evidence. How are we going to be able to prove this? And the way AB218 is written, people think it's a free-for-all. Everyone's going to come out of the woodwork and have their day in court. It's not like that. It's giving them the opportunity. We still have to do all of our checks and balances to make sure we're not accusing people who might not have a dog in the fight, of course, right? So we have to come up with corroborating evidence, declarations, file it with court, make sure the judge signs off on it and allows us to pursue this lawsuit. So that's where the real work is. We put a lot of that energy at the beginning of the case to make sure that when we take on this client, and we're never promising, but promising that we're going to do our best, that we have a positive road ahead, that we're going to be able to prove step by step what it is they're telling us. And that, I would say, from my perspective right now, in the infancy of these cases, is the most challenging part. Digging and uncovering and being an investigator and thinking outside the box, because, evidence that's 10, 20, 30 years old isn't just going to present itself.
Right.
You got to find a way to get to it. And our team at Dordulian Law Group, I can't underscore what different things we bring to the table. We're all so different with the same goal. And so it's like pieces of a puzzle. We just kind of fit together. If there's something I miss, Sam picks it. If something Sam misses, Moses sees it. So we all have different life experiences and professional experiences that come to the table to help us move these cases along.
And one of the realities is most of the victims, unfortunately, think back and say, well, throughout these years, I had all these difficult times in my life, and this is going to be an impediment to pursuing a case. And the truth is, with a lot of people who go through a sexual assault, especially as a child, they're so confused. They do tend to go down the path of whether it's using drugs, runaway, homelessness. All of these are factors in their mind saying, well, this is going to prevent me from pursuing justice. And it's not, because the reality is this is a common reaction to the pain that they're suffering, and they don't know how else to soothe or heal that pain or to quiet that pain. So it's a reality that we deal with, and it's a reality we can deal with. And one of the other factors is, people say, well, if this really happened, why didn't you report it right away? Well, one of the things that we do in prosecutions, whether it's criminal or civil, is we hire experts who come into court to explain to the jury the realities of what isn't really common sense. And the reality is, and the statistics bears this out, most people who go through a sexual assault, be a child or even as an adult, they do not report. And there's a lot of psychological reasons and factors for it. And most people don't appreciate it as jurors, but we bring in an expert to explain to the jury that this is normal. You don't expect someone to immediately run to the police. They do wait. A German study, I think, said that people wait until they're in their 50s before they actually report. So we bring in experts to explain to a jury all of these things that people may think is an impediment for me going forward and, to try to seek justice. They're not impediments.
Yeah.
They're actually what we would expect someone who have gone through such a horrible, traumatic event to go through, because that is a normal reaction.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's definitely difficult. I don't even think, I know in my personal life, people will always, especially when they hear, 5 different men molested me between 4 and 7, they're like, where were your parents? I'm like, ironically enough, they weren't that far. It's just that, and these were all people I knew or somehow were, just it's, and then, but then there's that, well, were you doing something? I mean,
Right.
I'm 4 years old.
Right.
What could I have possibly been doing at these ages to, and when that pattern gets set, then people are like, well, when you were a teenager, why didn't you say no? Well, guess what? I didn't know how to say no yet.
Right.
It's not about I want these things to happen to me. And any victim knows that, because it's something about somebody you trust, especially, or somebody that you care about, or somebody that you're looking up to suddenly violating you, and you unsure of, is this supposed to be happening? Going to, and again, going like the process. What do you guys, like, and I'm just asking this, like, as a defense, when the defense does try to turn it on your client, like, how do you guys as attorneys handle that?
Well, again, it goes back to just making sure people understand that these events that may look bad for them is something that you should expect as being part of someone who has gone through this kind of sexual assault, this traumatic event. So we do hire experts who will come in and tell the jury what is normal.
Mm-hmm.
This is normal. To hear that they resorted to drugs is not an abnormal thing. To hear that they waited till they were 50 is not abnormal. It's to be expected. All of these things that, again, make people think and hold back, go, well, I don't know, because look at all these negatives. Well, these negatives are what reality is, and we try to explain it to the jury. And in my experience, having done this for many, many years, when you give that jury the opportunity to understand, they do get it.
Right.
So I think, most of the victims who are out there don't feel like just because you went through some very difficult times, that's going to prevent you from going forward
Right.
and being able to get your justice. People will understand when it's presented to them in such a way, with experts in particular, who will demystify these concepts that people have that unfortunately are not true.
Right.
And I think jumping on that, one of the things that our clients need to hear is exactly this. Along the way, sometimes they've never heard that the things that they suffered were normal.
Right.
And when, honestly, we see so many cases and they all kind of follow the same pattern,
And that it wasn't their fault.
at all.
And
Yeah,
as
it's
a woman,
huge.
I got to ask
That's
you, and I'm
huge.
going to ask this, and by the way, men and women are sexually
Most
assaulted and
definitely.
abused. This is not just a woman thing in any shape or form. And I've often, I have 3 daughters and 1 son, and I'm telling you, I issued warnings and advice to him as often as I could. I often have told the story where I had my well, now she's grown and has her own child, but when she was a teenager, she came and said, Mom, can I go spend the night at my friend's house? And I was one of those parents who didn't let my kids, I said, they can come over here because I trust me and I know what's going on in this home, but, you know. And she was like, Mom, I said, I don't know the men. I don't know. And she's like, Mom, you're crazy. Nobody over there is a pedophile. Well, as I've shared the story before, one day, a couple years later, my daughter came home. It was her best friend. And it started off with, Mom, if I tell you something, will you promise not to say?
Wow.
I said, I can't make that promise. I just know it. I'm, familiar with that. And it came out that he was molesting her. He was prepping her to move her to the phase of rape. He had been molesting her since she was 7 years old. He was arrested. The mother was arrested for knowing that it was happening, and they both went to prison and lost custody of those kids. I want you to share, what have been some of the cases that have really touched your heart? Bring this down to a very human level for me.
There's so many. I mean, the one that comes to mind, it was one of the first ones I started working on when I switched sides from the defense to being a victim lawyer. It was a young girl, ages probably 4 through 14, and it was her grandfather. And the thing that sticks with me still about that case is it was so subtle, and it was wrapped up in sunshine and butterflies by this grandfather saying, I just love you so much. I don't know how to express it. And she was groomed all the way through those years until she became a teenager. And she liked a boy and had her first kiss and realized, wait a minute, I'm feeling weird things about grandpa. She never appreciated what was happening as being wrong.
Right.
And I'm a mother of 2 girls, and I carry these cases with me all the time, and they go places, day camp, summer camp, school, and I'm always asking those questions because they just don't know, and victims who are young also don't know. So fast forward, she becomes a teenager and feels these mixed emotions, like, I shouldn't feel that way about grandpa, but I like this boy and they're doing the same thing.
Right.
And so cases like that, that's the one that kind of hit that chord that these kids don't know. They shouldn't know.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's up to us to normalize that very abnormal experience, to tell them it's okay.
Right.
And we're going to get through it. And we're going to explain these things. And what you're feeling, the shame, the guilt, all of those things, we're going to peel those layers away. And with it comes closure, and with it comes freedom.
You know, there's a couple of cases that stand out for me. One of them goes back to when I was a prosecutor. It was a Catholic priest case. And something that the victim said, and this was in front of her father, and now as a father, it really moves me. And she was being molested by the priest. She never told anything to her parents. The reason why she didn't say anything, she explained this to the father, who was profusely crying as she's explaining this, is that like any father, and I probably might have, well, I haven't since I've experienced this, but many fathers probably will say this: if anybody harms you, honey, I'm going to kill him.
Right.
She took that literally. So when she was going through that abuse, she remembers thinking to herself, well, if I tell my dad, he's going to kill him, and if he kills him, he's going to go to prison. So she didn't say anything. And it was that comment that prevented her from coming forward to her parents. And it killed the dad to hear that, because it was an offhand remark. He wasn't actually meaning he's going to kill anybody, but...
Or maybe he did, because,
Maybe he did, but this gentleman that it didn't
Right.
appear like he would have that type of personality. But it's just that offhand comment you say to a child
Sure.
who takes it literally. And it broke him as he's hearing this from his now adult daughter to explain why she didn't come forward when it was happening. And that really stuck to me. Now as a parent, I'm very cautious in saying what I say to my children. So I don't say anything that would hopefully prevent them from coming to me and should anything happen. And with me and my wife, we're very, very open about talking about this very early on. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. We've already had this conversation about inappropriate touch and reporting to us and telling us everything, no secrets. One of the big things with children is these pedophiles, they always make it a big secret. And you have to always tell your children there are no secrets
Right.
from mommy and daddy, and they have to believe that they will feel safe coming to you with whatever secrets that the pedophile wants them to keep. That case and the second case was a young woman who was just terrified of coming forward. She finally did. And it was the date of trial, the first time she's going to testify. She hadn't seen him in a very long time. Walked into the courtroom, jury's sitting there, the judge is on the bench. We're coming from behind. He turns around and looks at her, and right there, right in front of the jury, she collapsed on the ground and broke down crying, violently crying. We took her out, got her composed. She didn't think she could do it. She says, I'm not sure I can go forward with this. She eventually did. And then afterwards, we had a very successful result. She came to me and told me that was the most empowering moment for her, because she was terrified of that man. But when she took the stand, he was the one that was scared of her. He couldn't
Right.
say anything. He couldn't do anything. He had to just sit there and listen. And she felt finally in control of him for the first time. And that to her, she said, was the most empowering thing. And hearing that from her was just extremely rewarding.
When you talk about this, and it's funny because you know me, I'm a tough cookie. I'm not afraid of much. And being who I am today, I know how to stand up for myself. But I can't lie. I think there is just an emotional moment when you really recognize what this person did to you, how wrong it was, and how wrong it was to not be able to to say this person did, and to have somebody else say that was wrong. I didn't have that surrounding me. And when you say that, I get very, very choked up, because I can only imagine if I did see him, I would be both hysterical and then both like, F you, this is finally, you're going to freaking, like, this is going to happen. One of the pastors has since passed away, I know, but the remaining, the woman who was the one who sat down and ironically enough was the one who said, I know that this happened. I mean, you know, to be able to say to her, you don't get to sweep this under the Jesus carpet. I mean, not to be mean, because I have nothing against Jesus, but you don't get to do that. And it is so empowering, and it's so important. You know, I want you to go in as a prosecutor. Let's touch a little bit more, and as for you as well, because I feel like you both, you know, I do feel it's important to educate people on what can be very subtle pedophile tendencies. You know, it's the nice things that they do, right? And there are a lot of parents who are like, there are people who wouldn't believe someone would touch their kid like that and do this. So let's talk about how pedophiles go about, actually, just for the sake of the discussion and really even giving other valuable education to other parents out there. What are some of the signs that you've seen, you know, where people go and start grooming somebody for potential pedophilia?
Sure. I'll start with gifts. It's always they're buying you something, and it's not necessarily something extravagant, but it's attention. It's you know, finding a weak spot in the victim, whatever that may be, a ride after school, a little note. We have a case where a basketball coach would write like sweet notes to this one player and kind of slip it in her locker every day, and just to start engaging, start the process. And she would, you know, innocently write one back to him, you know, thinking, I have this coach's attention. I like that. He gives me one-on-one training. I like that. He gives me a ride home. Gifts for family. We have another case where the individual kind of became a big brother to this gentleman, and no dad around, so he kind of took on that role. Christmas came along. What can I buy your mom? What can I buy your younger brother? Let me take you on a trip. So it's always couched in this form of, again, rainbows and sunshine. Like, you know, I'm giving you what you need. How could I be mean and do these things to you? So that's what grooms trust. It builds trust.
Right.
And they fill a void in that child, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be some, you know, significant void. It's just a small enough, you know, opening where they can come in and feed that need to then move on to the next level.
Right. I feel like vulnerability plays a part into that as well.
Absolutely.
That's a huge part.
You know,
they identify those children who have some vulnerability, something that's missing, as Arpineh said, something that's missing in their life, and they try to fill that void. And when they do, imagine as a child how conflicting and confusing that must be. Here's a person who I've grown to love, trust, and now is doing these things that I think is bad for me. What do you do in that moment? It's
Right.
a child who has to try to process this.
right. Well, I don't have to imagine it personally.
As
But
you know.
what I want to say and add to that is that, yeah, then because you touched on it. So when you like the fact that somebody is finally seeing you for the first time, you know, when somebody's seeming to care for you and then they do it, there is this moment where you're like, am I bad for liking them?
Right, right.
But I'm confused because what's happening doesn't seem
Doesn't
right.
feel right.
Because I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
I need to say that. But people, because they'll say that, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you say something that day? Because also I care about this person and I'm thinking that they care about me, right?
You feel also indebted to them in some way, right? Because they've done these nice things to you, and you think, you know that this isn't an even exchange, you know, maybe. I don't know that every child would even appreciate that. Now, in hindsight, of course, not an even exchange, but you feel as though maybe, well, you know, they did these things, I should just get it over with, or let them, or whatnot, you know, even though internal struggle is there. And so, but that's designed to be that way.
Right.
You know, they don't start off the first day inappropriately touching you. It's a long grooming process, right? Where you're friendly or trusting or needing them, you know, and then it's that conflict of, well, if I need them and if I say no, what am I going to do tomorrow when I need them for whatever the purposes, you know?
And we can't lose sight of the different position of power most children are with some adult. We always teach the children to always respect the adults, especially those in position of power. So most of these people who are teachers, who are coaches, who are priests, as a child, they are taught that you must trust them and believe them and do what they say. They must be right. So again, going back to as a child, to put that child in a position who has no power with this person who has great power, especially in the community. This person is loved in the community. This person is respected in the community, and they're an adult. And if they say this is normal, a child will sometimes accept that and believe that. And it will take many years for them to understand, no, this was completely wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would say firsthand that you think maybe they made a mistake.
Right.
Maybe I did something to give the wrong impression. I mean, I can absolutely, because as a 14-year-old girl, I can tell you, I just wanted to be loved. You know, I went, you know, in my case, and I just say this so people don't think I'm like throwing my family under the bus. My parents divorced when I was 2 years old. I don't ever remember them being married. And I went through these things, and I definitely can tell you at my teenage years, I was struggling. And now I look back, and what they perceived as me being rebellious, and then that my family being very conservative, very tough love. You don't listen to the rules, you're out. We don't care how old you are. You know, I mean, it was like, and that was kind of what happened. That's how I ended up being homeless. That's how I ended up in a Kaiser ICU waiting room, taking no-dos to commit suicide at 14, because I didn't have, you know, I'd love that we now empower. I try to be such an empowered and very vocal with my children and communicate. And even when they tick me off, I'm like, you're my child. You're my responsibility. I have to support you. Even if it's uncomfortable for me and I don't understand why you're acting like this. I want to know why you're acting like this. That's why. So my parents didn't know. They didn't know enough to get to the reason of why I was feeling the way that I was. And instead, I was just left to my own. And I know that that's what led to those steps of me being in this particular situation. But yes, this was a person in my church. This was a person that I know was respected. Who was going to believe me? I was this kid with the horrible background, allegedly, you know, which wasn't necessarily horrible, but in that case, it was. So let's talk about family members. You know, when you have women and men who might come out now. What have you seen with family? I'm just asking. I mean, I'm sure that it's across the board, but do you see support for them? Do you prepare them that maybe, you know, because there are people who actually make allegations against their own family members.
Most definitely.
How does that play into it?
It runs the spectrum, honestly. We have people who come in with their moms, like the grandfather case, it's her mom's father, you know, and her mom is 1,000% behind her, supporting her, and has severed, you know, all ties essentially with that side of the family, and she's okay with that. We have spouses now supporting each other. I mean, honestly, I would say the majority of the cases we see, there's a lot of family support. So that's great for our clients and our victims who have never talked about it and need, you know, kind of that support in the background. We do have cases too, though, that people are afraid to tell, you know, their siblings or their parents or, you know, the perpetrator's family. A lot of times it is family members. So there's a wide spectrum, but that should never deter.
Right.
You know, because at minimum you have us,
right?
You know, and the connections we make for our victims with therapy, victims advocates, that should be at least, you know, kind of that buffer that they need to move forward. It doesn't matter what anyone else in the rest of the world says. If they want to jump on and support, great, there's room for them. If they're going to be naysayers, we're not going to hear it and we're going to push forward.
Yeah, what do you say, you know, like I know you talked a bit about when you have to explain it to a jury, but let's just pretend I am a person who has doubt about my loved one who's now making an accusation, whether it's a family member or somebody else. What do you say to that person that's like, you know, that want to have their judgments, I guess, or want to have they want to, you know, I mean, I know that I often say, I say, hold that judgment because you weren't there, you don't know. I mean, how do you guys handle things? I mean, I know I'm getting jumbled on my words, guys. It's because it's sensitive, but it's, how you know what I mean?
Dealing with the family sometimes is very frustrating. I've had cases where the child makes an allegation against the mother's boyfriend, for example. And the most frustrating thing for me is to see that mom not supporting that child, even in cases where, the detective goes and talks to that perpetrator, that pedophile, who admits the contact, who admits that this occurred, but blames the child.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this mom who somehow accepts that as being okay. Incredibly frustrating. And if, you feel your heart goes out to that child who is alone. Those are very difficult cases. Those are very frustrating for me personally. You have other cases where, unfortunately, like you said, majority of the time it is someone you know, and oftentimes family members. We have one right now where our client is struggling with telling her siblings and her parents because it's a stepbrother who did this. And she has reported, and the dad supports her, but the mom is questioning it. And what a difficult position for her to be in. We're in contact with her on a daily basis. Like Arpineh says, she has us, and she calls us and kind of, we're the shoulder sometimes that she cries on a little bit and then goes back and trying to deal with her family. It is not easy, and I don't pretend nor tell everybody it will be an easy road, but at least in my experience, having done this with, hundreds of victims, it's a road that if they travel, oftentimes will lead to some form of healing for them, some form of empowerment for them. So not an easy road, but one that I think is ultimately going to be something that they are going to get something out of.
Yeah, at a minimum, you're putting someone on notice. You don't get away with doing that necessarily, to me. And not, I went to law school, and I have to say this, one of the first things I unfortunately learned, I went into it all like, I'm going to become an attorney because I want to help people and this and that. But there is that reality. It's not always about justice, right? It's about who has the better attorney, technicalities, unfortunately. I mean, I remember studying criminal law, and I would be emotionally exhausted doing case studies to read what some people would get away with.
Right.
Like you said, this is hard. So, as a person who knows that, I'm going into this, considering I might not get the victory that I want. But guess what? And I'm saying this for any victim out there. Let's go from victim. Right now, you may be survivor. But I think the point to this is to somehow hopefully make you the victor over this very horrible person.
Right.
And potentially an organization that then covered it up and didn't allow you that justice. It's about saying, no, you don't get to just do that. You might have to pay a freaking attorney to go defend this. And you know what? You're right. You might win. But I'm going to show you don't get away with doing that and not having any repercussions. I think that matters. What do you think is some of the truest benefits? I know we probably covered, but for AB218, the biggest benefit is what?
The fact that they can now have a voice, the fact that it's opened up again. That was once closed. AB 218 does a lot of different things. It redefines what childhood sexual abuse is. It broadens the definition from what we had in the past. It also, going forward, even in the future, even after the 3-year window expires, it also added several years to the reporting. Whereas before you had 8 years, so until the age of 26 from the age of majority. Now it's changed to 40. So it added several years to that. There's a discovery statute which essentially says that if you don't discover that your psychological injury is as a result of the sexual abuse that you went through, but you discover it later on in life. Well, before the law was you have 3 years from the time that you discover that. Now it's changed to 5 years. So there's some positive changes with AB 218, even after this look-back window does expire. But it's a great opportunity for people to finally get justice that would not have otherwise been able to get one.
Yeah, that's incredible. For you as a legal advocate, how does it feel to know that you're encouraging people? You guys came here today. We talked about this. You wanted to get this out there so that people understand this even exists, because I have a feeling a lot of people don't know about it.
It's true. I think the takeaway for me and for today and for here on out is there's a lot of fear of the uncertainty and of judgment and not knowing what the result is going to be. And I would just encourage everyone that if there's a doubt, err on the side of asking, finding, calling. You don't have to do anything you don't want to.
Right.
But oftentimes that first phone call and that first share lightens our victims so much so, and it gives them that ounce of control that they have not had all those years. And it's the first step. It's a building block to the next one. And a lot of times our victims get invigorated and even their personalities change through this process, watching them go through this. We may not win at the end. That's absolutely true what you said. We try our hardest, but there's lots of moving parts to that. But that's not the end result kind of doesn't always matter, especially in this, because the process itself of taking that control back and not caring what people think because you own your truth and you have your team behind you who's owning it with you, that alone is enough.
Yeah.
I mean, just today, I got an email, and it just kind of speaks to what Arpineh just said. It was a young woman who came to us, told us her story. She was a victim of child sexual assault by her employer at the time. And we encouraged her to work with the police and to do this thing called a pretext phone call, where you call your perpetrator, see if he will admit to what had happened in the past. She says there's absolutely no way she could talk to him. She didn't feel that she emotionally could handle that. After spending some time with us, she said, okay, let me think about this, and decided to go forward. Just today, we got an email saying that she made that first phone call, and she was elated that now she says, and this was her actual words, and people are now going to believe me because he did say something that does confirm what she has been saying. She never thought that people would believe her. Why should they? She's a child. He's this well-known, respected employer, a doctor, actually. And why would they believe her? And now she knows that they will believe her. It's his own words admitting it. And she feels so empowered by that and thanking us for pushing her to make that step. Yeah. Now, we haven't gotten anywhere with the case yet. This is just step one.
Right.
But she's already feeling great about where she's at versus where she was when she first gave us a phone call.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys kind of did the same thing with me. Admittedly, I was, and Detective Castillo, who was here before, he's retired. He just recently retired from LAPD. He spent decades
30 years
protecting young, children who in that sex crimes unit, and is highly regarded. And so now he works on your team, and he private investigates. And I was like, I don't even know where this guy is. How am I? He's like, I'll find him. And I love that, and then he sat me down and I have to say on the air what he said. I was like, because I want people to know that that's normal. Even that part is probably normal. I'm like, this is a long time ago. I've moved on from that part of my life. And Detective Castillo, right, Moses said, I know what you would say to another woman sitting across from you. And, you were there, and he's right. I would say that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if anyone else believes you. Exactly. You're telling the truth. Mm-hmm. When you're a true, and I don't mean that word true victim as if to imply somebody else's, but because as people will say, well, there's going to be people who come out who, but I'm focused on the people that it is their truth. And if this is my truth, I should be able to go forward. And I would encourage anyone else to do the same. So for me to sit in that chair and then feel like, what am I going to do? Yeah. And so I've decided that if we're kind of kicking around the idea, do we turn it into a short documentary where I share my process and offer that, because I don't I went home that night and there were points of the conversation where I would get emotional and I would start to get choked up like I am now, because it's not an easy time to remember. Mm-hmm. And my goal here with this in this podcast is to empower others. And, I really, really appreciate you guys coming on. If people want to reach out to you guys in California and ask the questions, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way to go about it?
They can either call us at 818-788-4919, go on our webpage, D as in David, dlawgroup.com. There's a lot of information on that webpage about representing victims of sexual assault, our background, our history. There's a contact page there. Just give us a call, give us an email, and we'll respond in kind. I just want to also thank you for being brave enough to come forward and to talk about this, because it is really helpful for others to hear other people's experience to help them come along, because I know it's not an easy thing to relive it, because you do. Every time you talk about it, you slightly relive that trauma.
Exactly.
And I want to thank you for, coming out and helping everybody else who might be in a similar boat.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I genuinely think, I always say, things happen for a reason. And with you guys coming to me, especially as I say, I try to show people that you can be stronger than things, and these things don't have to define you. It's an interesting opportunity to really go back to these people that I know for many years in the back of my mind. It's like, yeah, this is wrong. And not to finally have maybe an opportunity to be said to take action where I couldn't before.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for both
Thank
of your guys'
you.
time.
Thank you,
Ladies and
Aalia.
gentlemen, you know what? I really, this is the end of this season, but I do have every intention of returning next season, once again, renewed with that energy and guests that have valuable information. We have these conversations that are intended to be advocates and with compassion and authenticity. And we want you to always feel free to reach out to us, ask the questions, whether you're watching this or whether you're listening to it. You know, you need to ask the questions that can help maybe change the course of your own. You know, I do everything on this on the theme of we've got to admit that we have issues that we have to face, or you know, and then we have to ask the questions that get us to an answer, and then we change course, we adjust our behavior. So with this, I'm admitting that I am a survivor of a sexual assault. I am asking the people who can maybe help me. And then, you know what, I'm going to decide what adjustment I'm going to take in my future so that maybe I can gain, you know, what I deserve too. So I hope that others will reach out. Let us know your thoughts, and for any future topics you'd like to hear about, you can connect with me on Instagram, Aalia, AALIA_unsugarcoated, or go to our website, www.unsugarcoatedmedia.com. Thank you for your continued support. Please share this episode with anyone you think who might have been a victim and who you think might be a benefit from this. And in the meantime, we will see you next season. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for letting us be unsugarcoated. Take care.